thank you very much to all of the attendees who are staying a little later to listen to the story of ATOME. So ATOME, we are the first company listed on the London Stock Exchange focused on the production side of green hydrogen and green ammonia. So our theme is pretty much green energy and food security for the future. So since we listed back in December, we were given the green economy mark. Our first project are 100% based from renewable energy. We have also became member of the UK Hydrogen Association and importantly, the International Fertilizer Association. So whilst hydrogen is, the hype, what people remember, the reality is we are using hydrogen to produce ammonia, which will be used as both a fertilizer and a source of energy, and I will get into that discussion. Passing the usual disclaimers. So hopefully now you have the executive summary. I also need to point out we just had our interims on Monday. So if you want to see the most up-to-date presentation, it is available on our website. And I'm also realistic that a fair amount of this sector is pretty brand new for a number of investors. So we have endeavored on our website to provide as much information on the sector as possible. So our ambition is to be a world leader in the position of provision of green energy and as well green ammonia, with a strategy of going after low-cost power, which obviously is becoming scarcer and scarcer, and to use that to create low-cost fertilizer and low-cost energy. So we currently have a project pipeline of about 500 megawatt. That's equivalent to over 500,000 tons a year of ammonia, and with our first projects now on their way. So the idea for us is securing low-cost power. So we have actually secured our first power purchase agreement of 60 megawatt in the country of Paraguay, and I will explain that a little bit later. That project will scale up to 120 megawatt, which will then will have another phase of a further 300 megawatts. Just to give a sense of scale, as we produce 1 ton of ammonia, it's the cost of selling ammonia today is around $1,000. Obviously, this is a reflection of what's going on in today's market, but we have been economic and profitable on our model way before the sudden rise in food and energy prices. So with hydroelectric power available, we have appointed ATOME, which is one of the world leading engineering firm, to lead the early project engineering and design. We have also just hired Natixis Corporate Investment Bank to help on the funding at the project side. And we are also into very advanced discussion with a number of green infrastructure fund, as well as a couple of energy slash fertilizer companies who are interested at the project level. And finally, we have green fuel mobility, and so what we call Automobility, which has where we have already ordered the electrolyzer, and that will be put in production and will deliver hydrogen for mobility in Paraguay next year. But you can have the best idea of the world. If you don't have a management to put it through, it becomes quite complicated. So I started my career as an engineer commissioning power plants in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then I moved to the oil and gas industry, so from GE to Schlumberger, and transitioned to the finance side, where I was first with Standard Chartered, looking at oil and gas and LNG across emerging markets. And for the past 9 years, I had been the chief investment officer of the International Finance Corporation. That's the private investment arm of the World Bank, where we had a portfolio of around $11 billion of assets, which over time became increasingly skewed towards renewable. And the realization of our strategy and the beginning of it was what do you need to actually accelerate the hydrogen economy? There's a lot of talk about it. You've seen a lot of investment around the technology side. I think ITM at one point was the darling of the market as the produce electrolyzers. But at one point you need to produce the molecule, you need to produce the product. And the best way to do it is to go after places where you have an existing low cost of power, reliable baseload low cost of power, which allows you to be economical head-on with existing hydrocarbon-based sources of energy and fertilizer, and also an existing market. And the hydrogen economy is growing, but the ammonia market exists. So what we were looking is places with existing power, existing infrastructure, existing markets, so we could really concentrate on the small part of it, which was the refining of electrons into molecules. So I'm joined with my chairman, Peter Levine, who had quite a track record into creating and exiting energy companies. I think the most famous one was Imperial Energy, that he exited at about, I think, $2.4 billion back in 2009. And he also was the chairman of a number of construction and engineering companies. In the end, it is green energy, but it's pretty much like the chemical industry. It's a margins game. You really need to look after your margins and make sure that you have the lowest cost of capital, the lowest construction cost, and also the lowest cost of energy, to make sure you, at the end, you have the lowest and cheapest product that will always find a market, even if it's a premium green product. We also have Jim Spalding, who is the president for ATOME Paraguay. I actually met Jim when I was at the World Bank, and importantly, he has experience both on the regulation side, having worked in the government for quite a few decades in very senior roles, and also he was managing the hydroelectric dam Itaipu for about 5 years. So his understanding of the energy industry and the local political economy is second to none. And also, as an independent non-exec director, we have Marie-Rose de Valadares. Marie-Rose used to be the head of a partnership unit for hydrogen at the International Energy Agency. So quite a key asset for us to be able to have the discussions with all of the major players on the engineering side, on the offtake side, whilst as well helping us really understand what is the truth and sometimes what is the shiny thing on the brochure, which doesn't quite stack up. A lot of people are saying, why hydrogen now? I mean, hydrogen for the past 3 decades, there was a lot of boom and bust. What is the difference today? And her bringing that experience and enabling us to, first of all, being taken credibly by a number of these very large players. We're talking the Siemenses, KBR, Fluor of this world, but also enabling us very quickly to decide, yes, no, are we going with the right partnership or the right business model? So hydrogen, that's really the highest level view I can give you today. And again, there's a lot of information out there. And actually, McKinsey just came out with a brand new report on hydrogen. So we use hydrogen in a number of industries today, right? It's mostly for chemical, a little bit of refining, a lot of fertilizer, iron and steel, but 95% of that hydrogen is made from fossil fuel. So if you look at the picture on the bottom left, you see gray hydrogen, which is the existing way to make hydrogen. You would take natural gas, you go through steam methane reformation, out comes hydrogen, but also comes carbon. And where it makes a very inefficient fuel is that it takes 3 units of energy of natural gas mostly to create 1 unit of energy in the form of hydrogen. So clearly not the most favored way as far as energy of the future. The other side of hydrogen, which is also being quite discussed, is blue hydrogen, which is extracted, again, it's like gray hydrogen, but you add carbon storage to it, which means you have more cost for the same molecule, and also you need a price of carbon that the market will pay you of above $150 a ton at the moment, which obviously is much bigger than what the market will pay you. And finally, the way to make green hydrogen is you take renewable electricity, you take water, and you split the molecule of water with an electrolyzer. And an electrolyzer is pretty much a giant electrical hammer. Hydrogen comes out on one end, oxygen on the other side. In fact, you can also sell the oxygen, for example, whether it's for the medical sector or even the waste sector. And with the hydrogen, you can use it in a number of ways. So as a fuel, because the green hydrogen is exactly like the gray hydrogen, you can use it as a fuel, as a way to transport energy. You can use it again as a chemical, and you can use it as also increasingly now as a way to power vehicles. However, it is not the best molecule for when it comes to marine transport, for example, or to transport over the long distances, which is why the ammonia side has become increasingly interesting. Now, if I have to give you an idea and a size of a market, I think the estimation is that because hydrogen is a molecule, it does things that an electron cannot do. And that's quite important when you think of it, that if you want to be able to displace about 20% of the world's oil that we use at the moment, you need a molecule, right? There's only so many cables you can pull across the world, which is why we have, for example, hydrogen buses in London. It's not because there is, it made technical sense to have less electric buses. It's because you get to a point where the grid couldn't take more electric buses in London, so you had to go and use hydrogen. So it's a $10 trillion market opportunity you can address. But again, this one is being built. And our view is to be able to produce a molecule that you can sell today into the market, which is ammonia. Right? Ammonia is the second largest traded chemical in the world. We're talking of a market which is over $7 billion a year, and also which is pretty much based on natural gas. So if you want to have an idea of what is the cost to produce hydrogen, you just need to look at, ammonia. You just need to look at the forward curve of natural gas, which is what we have showed on the bottom right of this slide. So the idea for us is we will produce with hydrogen, we make ammonia, and ammonia we sell into a globally traded market. And you have the first market being fertilizer. We are in Paraguay, which is a country which also already imports a large quantity of fertilizer, and next to Brazil, which is the world's largest importer of fertilizers. The interesting bit today, and we are in a very special situation, is that 30%, nearly 30% of all ammonia is being made between Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. So you get a sense of the urgency to find a way to produce that molecule very quickly, so that we don't end up in a problem with energy security and food security. So why Paraguay? Well, Paraguay is the place where you have Itaipu. I mentioned that Jim was the manager of the Itaipu Dam, which is the second largest hydroelectric dam in the world. This is jointly shared between Brazil and Paraguay. But Paraguay's domestic demand is only a portion of what actually they generate. And the strategy for Paraguay is to use these domestic electrons, which are very cheap, to create domestic molecules so they can displace importing oil and gas, displace importing fertilizer. So we're looking at a place where you have, on average, about 2 to 5 gigawatt of excess electricity, which is currently being sold into Brazil because it doesn't have a market locally. So this is how we started our discussions with Ande a couple of years ago, and now we have fast-tracked the project. When we were looking at when we did the listing, we were looking at about 250 megawatt of projects in Paraguay. Now we have increased that to 400. With the first project now being signed, the power purchase agreement of 60 megawatt, as I mentioned, there is a very high likelihood that actually we will go to 120 megawatt. And the idea is that by the end of Q1 of 2023, we will have reached final investment decision and go into construction. And then 2 years later, we will be producing and selling ammonia into an existing market. There is a phase 2 of that we call Itaipu Iguaçu. So we are discussing at the moment with Ande, which has an excess capacity in one of their substations closer to the Itaipu Dam of about 500 megawatt. And now we are currently negotiating 300 megawatt. Now, to put that into context, these are actually world-class projects, because today the largest project disclosed doing on using electrolyzers to create hydrogen and ammonia is about 100 megawatt, and it's in China. The global today the global production of hydrogen from electrolyzers is about 550 megawatt, and it's a world which is moving extremely fast. However, there are very, very, very few projects which are moving from front-end engineering and design to final investment decision. I mean, to give you a sense of scale, again, we're looking at about $75 billion of investment announced, of which only a couple billion have now reached final investment decision, and most of them have to rely on extensive government subsidies because the cost of the power that we use is so low. We're talking about $31 a megawatt hour. We are economical, and we're able to sell the molecule extremely profitably without the need for any subsidies whatsoever. And yet, because this is green hydrogen, green ammonia, we do benefit from significant carbon credits. I mentioned also earlier on the mobility side, so we had ordered a 1 megawatt electrolyzer, which will be in production early next year, so that we'll be able to create some early cash flow next year. And it's all about priming the pump, if you allow me to say, of the mobility sector in Paraguay, again a country which has to import significant amount of diesel, which also has the most advanced electromobility law in all of Latin America, being one of the first one to invest into electric buses. So Trafigura is one of our major shareholders, and they own one of the largest fueling station network in the country called Puma. So we have, the agreements with them so that when we can scale up the mobility side, we will. But clearly, 90% of our business is focused on industrial production of ammonia and selling it to the local and international market. So we have another project which is in Iceland. So this is the project. This is a picture of the Baki site, and if you see it, it corresponds to our design philosophy, where we are close to the source of power. This and also, if you look to the top right of the picture, you do have the Husavik harbor. So the idea is we take existing power from a substation which has about 200 megawatt of excess power. We take existing access to water, again, keeping low on the infrastructure, low on the capex, low on the opex, and we use an existing port to export the product into Europe. Where Iceland is quite interesting in itself is that it is close to Europe, so you have access to what is today the most premium market for hydrogen and ammonia. I mean, everybody knows what's going on at the moment on the eastern side of Europe. But the reality is, from a longer term, there is a number of regulation moving, which is going to force even the shipping industry to move into green fuels. And ammonia is slated to be one of the largest source of green fuel for the shipping sector. Which is obviously makes it quite interesting in the Icelandic state, which has a $10 billion plus shipping and fishing industry. So we are negotiating the power purchase agreement. This is when the clock starts typically, and the government has actually just last week provided a green fuel subsidiary with $175,000 subsidy, grant. In order to continue the work as we mature the projects to full power purchase agreement. So the outlook for us, I mean, we've been very busy since we've listed. We are looking to install the mobility unit next year and have then first revenue. Most importantly for us, it's the Villeta site, where we will be reaching final investment decision by Q1. Over the next few weeks, we will announce the engineering firms which will be selected to lead the front-end engineering and design. And also we are going through the market study, which is helping us as we negotiate with off-takers and because there's a lot of discussions going as we speak, so that we can start then construction from mid-2023, and so we can get into production 2025. What we have seen so far is that as a number of projects globally have slowed down because of the power increase so much, I mean, to give you a sense, we are paying $30 per megawatt long term, whilst today, if I were to buy power on the spot market in Germany, it will be about $1,000 a megawatt. That puts us into a significant advantage, and that has slowed down all of these other projects, which are now not ordering electrolyzers, which means there is an excess of supply of electrolyzers in the market today, making it a buyer's market. And the other project, Itaipu, which obviously we are negotiating the power purchase agreement, which hopefully we will be announcing in the next few months. And similarly with Iceland, we are working very hard on maturing our discussions into a fixed long-term power purchase agreement. So it was a very, very short view of what we have been doing. So I would definitely recommend that you have a look at our website at our most updated presentation. But now I'm open for questions.
Running through that presentation for us. Excellent. A very, very different perspective on green energy and moving forward as we are in the world. So I've got a few questions here already coming through the system. Milestones in 2023, game changers, because on your graph there's quite a lot of arrows, but not a great deal. What's going to be actually producing something for the investors to get their heads around?
Of course. So you have to think of us the same way you would think about a power developer or even a small cap oil and gas, right? We're talking a relatively large project. I mean, 60 megawatt in itself is not huge, but the way our design philosophy and the way I used to act like when I was investing at the IFC is we mature projects to a point where we end up having all of the technical design, all of the off-takers lined up, all of the costs done, and then at that particular point in time, we put an SPV together and we raise funding at the SPV level, which is why I announced Natixis as our financial advisor. But also, it's about farming into the assets. We have large green infrastructure funds, energy companies which are looking for assets like us. And unfortunately, if they want to go at it by themselves today, they're looking at things which will not be there between 28, 29, 30. So from that design philosophy, I think you will see actually quite a very large game changer. By the time we reach FID, again, we will be one of the first. And at the moment, we are ex aequo largest one in Latin America. The moment we announce the 120 megawatt, we will be the largest one in Latin America.
Okay, good. Someone says, well, what are the barriers to entry?
So the barriers to entry, it's time and credibility, honestly. We had actually, before listing, we had discussed with a number of infrastructure funds who have historically invested into developers. And what we realized is that actually, you would be one of 15, 20, 30 management team all hunting with the same design of saying, oh, I have an IOU from, let's say, Blackstone to go and chase these things. However, our counterparts are actually utilities, and their job is to provide power on a reliable basis to the people and some of the large industrial. And so if you look at, let's call them 5 men and a dog and a piece of paper, that's very difficult for credibility, which is why we took the decision to get listed, which has its inconvenience, but also a lot of advantage attached to it, especially in the terms of transparency.
And I think also it highlights where you've focused on 2 particular countries, Iceland and Paraguay, and you've outlined exactly the reasons why you've chosen those particular
Correct. And there's that side, and also the fact that if I look at some of the very large projects being discussed today, which are very ambitious and need to happen, but let's say, Fortescue Australia, they have to build power generation, transmission line, water treatment facilities, roads, cables, port. I don't have to do any of that. I have to do electrolyzer, compressor, ammonia loop, storage, and then I sell at the flange. That just completely changes the game, but also because we started, more than 2.5 years before. So it's a design philosophy that also we continue to follow. And when we look at further business development, we are looking at these places which have existing power, an existing market, and a fair amount of that infrastructure without chasing the gigawatts. Gigawatt is great, but we have to be honest, the largest project today in operation is 100 megawatt. So you need to start working before you can run.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. Can you give us some more information about your relationship with President Energy?
Sure. So actually, the way we did it, we actually incubated ATOME within President Energy. And President Energy had about 9 years experience in the country of Paraguay. And when I was at the World Bank at IFC, actually, we invested in President in 2014, looking at exactly the thesis that you have a country which is the 4th largest exporter of soybean, the largest exporter of green energy in the world, and yet has to import all of its hydrocarbons. Unfortunately, that wasn't successful. Stuff happens. But the realization that actually this is the world's largest exporter of green energy for cheap, was kind of an aha moment. So we spun out and we listed. So they're still a very large shareholder of us, I think about 27%. But that's where the relationship starts. It's a different team. It's a different way of running because it's a different business, right? One is oil, the other one is water-based.
Okay, thank you. Institutional investors, have you got many of those on board? Are you encouraging more institutional investors to get on board?
So we do. I mean, so we have Schroders, Trafigura, Myton as the largest institutional investors. We are talking all the time to them. I mean, I think I made a point that I do at least 2 meetings a week with new institutional investors, so they know about us, they know our story, and they can put us into their, let's call it the hopper. The reality, it's, you know, they're all looking at us, and they're also looking for when is the best point to join and get scale, right? So clearly we are still, you know, relatively small for a number of them, but
Yep.
you know, as we progress to FID, that's going to be quite different.
Absolutely. Just time for one more quick question. Cash burn seems to be, or is flagging up the notion that you a further raise. When do you think you'll need to raise again?
So the way we have, when we raised back in December, we had a strategy to get to a final investment decision on the raise by the end of 2023. So we have enough cash to get all the way down to the end of 2023. So, and the idea for us, as I explained earlier, is once we get to final investment decision, we will do the asset level raise and we will optimize the sources of funding at that level. So I think we're still in a pretty good position. And actually, if you look at our interims, we are exactly where we said we would be by now.
Excellent. That's a good way to finish. Thank you very much, Olivier. Very much appreciate it.
Chris.
And you have a good evening, and we'll send on the presentation to the people who tuned in this evening, and I'll send you the video for uploading onto your website as well.